Yes, good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let the students join and then we'll start the class. So on the previous turn, we were talking about the different characteristic features which are related to algae. And then we also studied about the bryophytes, that how can bryophytes be called as amphibians and why do we call them as the amphibians of the plant kingdom, right? That was an essential part. So on the previous turn, I gave you a reason that why these bryophytes are called as the particularly amphibians of the plant kingdom. Yes. Anyone who can tell me why do we call them as the amphibians of the plant kingdom? Yes. Any student which can tell me why we are calling the bryophytes as the amphibians of the plant kingdom? Yes. Okay. Anugya. Yes, Peter Gauri, you can also go ahead. Hanji beta.
Because they live in soil but need water for reproduction.
Yes, but they need water for the reproduction. And basically by reproduction, we are saying for the sexual reproduction. So today we are going to start with the bryophytes. Okay. And the first point that we have talked about it, that these bryophytes are called as amphibians, right? They are called amphibians of plant kingdom. Now, they are called the amphibians of the plant kingdom for a reason, as I told you in the previous session also, that the amphibians have a characteristic point that the fertilization is taking place in water. And that's why water becomes very much essential for their fertilization. And this particular characteristics is also found in the amphibian category of the animal kingdom. So they are resembling to the amphibian only in one aspect. केवल एक ही चीज में ये मैच कर रहे हैं, otherwise they are not matching with any other, right? So since they are matching in only one of the aspect, that's why we are saying that they are amphibians of the plant kingdom. Only one aspect, and that is fertilization. And since we consider the fertilization as a very important aspect of the sexual reproduction, because sexual reproduction is very important, right? So that's why we have given it a separate title as amphibians of the plant kingdom. Any question or any doubt? Do you have any query related to the previous session? Yes. Do you have any question or any query related to the previous session, Peter? No? Okay, then let's move on to the next part that basically is about the bryophytes. And when we are talking about the bryophytes, as I told you, they are called the amphibians of the plant kingdom. But more importantly, these bryophytes, as I told you, they have developed from the algae. So bryophytes are much more advanced than the algae, right? Bryophytes are much more advanced. Now let's see some of the more important points, that where they can be found, their habitat, sexual reproduction, and everything related to them. Okay. So first point that we are going to understand or we are going to study is that they are found. That means we are talking about habitat. So they can be found at damp places, that means गीली जगह जो होती है, and they can also be found at humid places जहाँ पे नमी बहुत ज़्यादा होती है, and they can be also found at the shaded localities. Shaded locality means Shaded locality means where there is a shade, जहाँ पे छांव होती है, बहुत ज्यादा धूप नहीं हो. Okay, that's basically the shaded locality. Okay. Now, another important aspect of bryophytes is about their body. It is about their body. So the body is not differentiated, first of all, into the root, stem, and leaf, but it is more differentiated than the algae. So it's kind of like we can say it is thallus-like. It is thallus-like only, but it is more differentiated. More differentiated than algae. Okay. So since they are more differentiated than algae, we can use the particular terms here and we can say that the body is divided into several parts, that is stem-like structures or leaf-like structures and root-like structures. Okay. But we are not able to particularly differentiate all the features as together. हम सबको differentiate नहीं कर पाते हैं. क्यों? Because the body is not very much well differentiated. ऐसा भी नहीं है कि बहुत ज्यादा अच्छे से हमें पता लग पा रहा है कि कौन सी चीज क्या है, but they are more differentiated than the algae. Okay. Now, another important aspect is that these bryophytes, जो हम bryophytes की बात कर रहे हैं, these are actually haploid in structure. That means these bryophytes are having their body as haploids. Bryophytes, their main plant body is haploid. In the algae also, their main plant body was haploid. Okay, so main plant body is haploid and it develops from the gametophyte. It develops from the spores that are produced from the sporophyte. So the main body is gametophyte. इसका मतलब क्या है? Let's understand that. Gametophyte. So there are two things which are called as gametophyte, and there are two things, gametophyte and sporophyte. So let's see what these two things are. So gametophyte, and then there is a sporophyte. So there are two terms. Okay, let's now understand how we can relate them. Always remember that the gametophyte is going to produce the gametes. ये हमेशा क्या produce करेगा बेटा? Gametes produce करेगा. The sporophyte is always going to produce the spores. Okay, so gametophyte is going to produce the spores, is going to produce the gamete, and sporophyte is going to produce the spores. Okay, and one important thing that we should understand and we should remember that they can be produced from each other. मतलब ये एक दूसरे को generate कर सकते हैं. Meaning that gametophytes can produce the sporophyte and sporophytes can produce the gametophyte. Okay, but the question is how? कैसे produce कर पाएंगे? Right? How they are able to produce it? Now, first of all, the gametophyte is going to produce the gametes. So the gametophyte produces the male gamete and it also produces the female gamete. Okay, it produces the male and it produces the female gamete. Both type of gametes are produced by the gametophyte. These particular two gametes, they fuse together to form the zygote. Okay, they form the zygote. Now, this zygote will germinate into a sporophyte. This zygote, it will germinate, it will develop into the sporophyte. Okay, then after this, sporophyte is going to produce some of the tiny particles. Those are called spores. So sporophyte क्या produce करेगा बेटा? Spores produce करेगा. Now the important thing here to remember, another important point, is that it's going to do that by the meiosis. तो यहाँ पे जो spores produce होते हैं वो meiosis के through produce होते हैं. Okay? They are produced through the meiosis. Now, since the spores are produced through the meiosis, so what will be the ploidy of the spores? Diploid or haploid? Spores will be diploid or they will be haploid. Yes, anyone?
So haploid.
Haploid. Why? Why they are going to be haploid, beta?
So because meiosis occurs and meiosis is a reductional division.
Yes, because the spores are being formed after the meiosis, as we are saying that they are produced after the meiosis, or they are the result of meiosis. So we obviously know that the meiosis produces haploid cells, right? So that's why the spores are going to be haploid in structure. Haploid. So the spores will germinate. The spores will germinate and they are going to form the gametophyte. Okay, spores germinate karenge and they are going to form the gametophyte, and this gametophyte is going to further develop in its structure, and once it is mature, it is going to produce the male and the female gametes, and the cycle repeats. Okay, so this is how the bryophytes are having the gametophyte and the sporophyte. Any problem up till here? Anyone having any question? Okay then. Now there is a diagram given in your NCERT and that goes like somewhat like this. So there are some leaves like this, and then there is, then there is a elaborated seta, and after that there is a capsule. Okay, and below this part we are having here the rhizoids, root like structures. Okay, so in your NCERT what we have found is that there are two labelings for this. यहाँ पर अब दो labelings हो जाती है. कौन कौन सी बेटा? So this particular part is called as the sporophyte. Okay, and the part below the sporophyte is called as gametophyte. Now this is not universal. ऐसा नहीं होता कि gametophyte हमेशा नीचे ही होता है और sporophyte हमेशा ऊपर ही होता है और इस तरीके का structure ही होता है, दोनों interconnected होते हैं. No, there is no such criteria. But it is happening in the case of bryophytes. That's why we are studying it. Okay, ये केवल bryophytes में हो रहा है. Okay, but what is happening? अब हो क्या रहा है? Let's understand that. So these particular parts, they are called rhizoids. Okay, this particular root like structure, which is the main root, this is called the main axis. Okay, main axis, and after the main axis we are having leaves. So these are leaves. These are not the proper leaves. ये बिल्कुल entirely बेटा proper leaves नहीं है, but they are leaves. They are obviously not the proper leaf because these plants are not the very advanced plants, right? So that's why we are saying that they are leaves, but not the leaves of flowering plants or not the leaf of angiosperms. So they are leaf-like structures. Now this particular part here, this is the seta, and this part over here, it is the capsule. So you can see that a sporophyte is differentiated into two parts, seta and capsule. Moreover, the sporophyte also has a part which is called as foot. So this part is called as foot. So sporophyte is differentiated into three parts, foot, seta and capsule. Okay, and the gametophyte, it is differentiated into main axis, leaf and the rhizoids. Okay, now what are we expecting over here? हम यहाँ पे क्या पढ़ना चाह रहे हैं? Now as you can see, this is the gametophyte, and just now we have studied that the gametophyte is going to produce the male gamete and it is going to produce the female gamete. Okay then, so let's say this is the gametophyte. Okay, let's say this is the gametophyte. So it is going to have like this. Let's say these two are the male gametes. Okay, these two are the male and female gametes. Okay, the white portion. Obviously, since it is the male gamete and since it's the female gamete, they are going to be fusing. So let's say they fuse together and now they form the zygote. Okay, so a zygote is formed. So I'm going to represent the zygote with the red color. So let's say here the zygote is formed. Obviously, when the zygote is formed, the gametes will no longer be available. So we are going to rub them. Oh, sorry for that. So our gametophyte is also gone. Okay. Let's get it back. Okay. So here is a zygote. Now you can see that the zygote is developed on the gametophyte. तो zygote कहाँ develop हुआ है बेटा? Gametophyte के ऊपर ही develop हो गया. And that's why it's going to grow on the gametophyte only. तो gametophyte के ऊपर ही grow कर जाता है. Okay, so it's going to form a stem-like structure which is called the seta, and then the seta is going to form a capsule, जो हमें इस diagram में दिखाई दे रहा है. Okay, so first of all, सबसे पहले structure कौन सा बना? Gametophyte. When the gametophyte has produced the male and female gamete, it has produced the male and female gamete, they will fuse together to form a zygote, and the zygote will differentiate itself or it will germinate to form the sporophyte, which can be found as the having parts of foot, seta, and capsule. Is this point clear to you that the gametophyte is having a sporophyte growing on it? Yes, beta? Is this point clear to everyone? Yes. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now the next point that we are going to understand is about this capsule. This capsule has some specialty in it. It's going to produce spores. जो हमने पढ़ा था ना बेटा कि the sporophyte is going to produce spores through the meiosis. So it's going to produce the spores inside it. यहाँ पर क्या बनेंगे हमारे? Spores बनेंगे. ठीक है? Obviously through the meiosis only. And when this capsule is going to rupture, the spores are going to disperse. Spores क्या करेंगे? फैल जाएंगे हवा में. Okay, and once they are dispersed in the atmosphere or in the environment, they will grow into a new gametophyte. They will germinate and they are going to form a new gametophyte. Simple as that. And the cycle will be repeated. Okay, so this is how they are performing the sexual reproduction. Okay, so this is how they are doing the sexual reproduction. So do you have any question related to how the gametophyte or sporophyte is being done? स्पोरोफाइट और गैमेटोफाइट के बीच में कोई कंफ्यूजन तो नहीं है बेटा? Okay, then now I'm going to show you a diagram which is the part of your NCERT. Okay, just a second. Chapter 3. Okay. And we are not able to. Just a second. Yes. So I'm going to share my screen. Yes. In the chapter number 3, we have studied all that part. Okay. Now, what we are going to see here is that the bryophytes, the elaborative structure of the bryophytes. Okay. So here you can see. Here. There is a sporophyte, there is a gametophyte, and now you can see there is a capsule, there's a seta, leaves, main axis, rhizoids. Okay, so the body of the this particular bryophyte can be elaborative. So we are observing one thing. एक चीज तो बहुत क्लियर है कि हमने पढ़ा था मेन बॉडी कैसी है, गैमेटोफाइट. सो दैट मींस मेन प्लांट क्या है, ब्रायोफाइट गैमेटोफिटिक है. उसके ऊपर स्पोरोफाइट जनरेट कर रहा है, स्पोरोफाइट उसके ऊपर है. और स्पोरोफाइट कब बनता है, आफ्टर द zygote formation. So sporophyte is also going to be diploid in every condition. स्पोरोफाइट हमेशा क्या होता है बेटा, डिप्लॉयड होता है. और गैमेटोफाइट जो होता है वो हमेशा हैप्लॉयड होता है. ओके, सो दीज टू थिंग्स शुड बी वेरी मच क्लियर. नाउ this particular aspect is not going to happen in every of the bryophytes. हर एक bryophytes में ऐसा नहीं होगा. Why? Because the bryophytes is having two categories. Bryophytes की दो categories होती हैं, उसमें से एक में ऐसा होता है. दूसरे केस में जिसको हम बोलते हैं liver birds, you can see the diagram of liver birds now. So these liver birds are having a thalloid body. So their body is thalloid. That means they are having a thallus-like structure. Now you can see some of the gamma cups, right? There are rhizoids. Rhizoids हमें पता है root-like structure. Then we are having gamma cups. So what are these gamma cups? We are going to understand that. Then we have archegoniophore. And then we have anthridiophore. This is the only difference, right? So the archegoniophore is related to the female sex organ. It is female sex organ. And anthridiophore, it is basically the male sex organ. Okay, sorry, not male sex organ, organ bearing structure. Bearing structure, because there is a phore, phore. Phore means bearing structure, so it's a sex organ bearing structure. Now this bearing structure is having a archegonia or archegonium. Then this also is having a anthridium or anthridia. Okay, so sex organ is anthridia or archegonium, but an archegoniophore is basically a bearing structure which is bearing sex organ. Archegoniophore, female sex organ, and anthridiophore, male sex organ bearing structure. Okay, now let's come back to our topic. Let's come back to the blackboard here. So we were discussing about the sporophyte and gametophyte. So is sporophyte, if I'm talking about only sporophyte, that means foot, seta, and capsule. So can you tell me the sporophyte is free living or is it dependent on the gametophyte? Sporophyte, is it free living or is it dependent on the gametophyte? Yes, beta.
It is dependent.
It is dependent on the gametophyte. So ये gametophyte पे depend कर रहा है. And if there is no gametophyte, then there is no sporophyte, right? So since there the sporophyte is not free living, but it is attached to the gametophyte, and this gametophyte is having leaves. यहाँ पर leaves है, and leaves are photosynthetic. So that means we can say, हम थोड़ा सा अपना खतरनाक दिमाग लगाएंगे, and we are going to say that sporophyte is dependent on the gametophyte so that it can have nourishment. तो स्पोरोफाइट में आपको कहीं पे लीव्स नहीं दिखाई दे रही, तो ये फूड कहां से लेगा, गैमेटोफाइट से लेगा. ओके, so and finally the sporophyte is going to undergo some meiosis in the capsule and it's going to produce the spores. और obviously ये spores germinate करके क्या करेंगे बेटा, they are going to produce the gametophyte. Okay, now let's see the economical importance, or we can say economical significance of the bryophytes. Okay, now since we know that the bryophytes are of two types, okay, ये वाला part हमने cover नहीं करा, but there is a category, there are two categories of bryophytes. One is called the liverbirds, okay, and the other one is called mosses. So when we are talking about the mosses, the mosses क्या होते हैं? Well, the mosses are like the tiny, very tiny green plants जो ऐसे जब हम कभी जंगल में जाते हैं, for example like we are going to any kind of forest or any kind of garden, then we find some wall or some tree which is having these bryophytes on it, जिसको हम बोलते हैं ना कि इस पे काई लग गई है. That's basically the mosses. Okay, so that mosses can be served as food for the various mammals, for the various birds, for the various basically herbivorous animals. Okay, so it can serve as food for the herbivorous animals. Moreover, there is a moss which is called as sphagnum. This particular moss provides peat, and this particular peat is having a property that it can be used as fuel, and it has water holding capacity. Okay, and since it has the water holding capacity, that means it can retain the moisture, and since it can retain the moisture, we can use it as the packing material. Okay, we can use it as a packing material. Now, about the another important aspect of the bryophytes is that they play a very important role in the succession. Now, what is succession? In the social science, you have studied about a term called successor, right? Successor. What is a successor? जो king के बाद जो भी who's going to be the who's going to have the throne, that's basically the person who is called the successor, right? Generally it is the son or the daughter of the royal family. So here also we are talking about some kind of that sense only, but since we are studying biology, तो हम यहाँ पर वो वाला successor नहीं पढ़ रहे. Succession here means who is going to be who is going to capture or live in a particular area and who is going to thrive there. वहां पर जाके अपनी dominance बना ले, मतलब कि अपने एक एरिया में जाकर के अपना दबदबा बनाना, that's called basically the succession. Okay, so the earlier जब हम when we study the ecology, हम environment की study करते हैं, we say that the entire earth was made up of some rocks, कुछ चट्टानें ही थी केवल. Okay, so on these rocks, bryophytes and algae and some of the fungus, they started to grow. उनका growth होनी start हो गई. Because of that and because of weathering of rocks, this particular big rock, which was very much kilometers in diameter, it is started to develop some of the cracks in it. Because of the weathering of rocks and because of the growth of these bryophytes, it developed some cracks in it. And ultimately, it fell apart into the pieces, and these pieces were again converted into finer particles, and finally we have soil. तो जो मिट्टी आई है वो किससे आई है? चट्टानों से आई है. और ये चट्टान मिट्टी में कैसे कन्वर्ट हुए हैं? Because of the succession. Succession means ये bryophytes जो हैं, these bryophytes, they actually were the first to grow on the rocks. Okay, so because they were the first to grow on the rocks, that's why we say that they play a very important part in the succession. Because directly you cannot grow a forest on a rock. एक चट्टान पे आप कभी भी forest तो उगा नहीं सकते. It has to be first of all converted into the soil. उसको पहले मिट्टी में convert करना पड़ेगा, right? So this is what we are talking about here. Another important point is that these particular mosses, they provide dense mats like structure. Now, what is the dense mat-like structure? ऐसा लगता है बेटे, for example, there is a green color का mat बिछा दिया, किसने चादर सी बिछा दिया. And that's not basically, I'm not talking about the grasses. Okay, we are talking about the mosses. Let me just show you what the mosses look like. Okay. So, okay, we are running out of time, but no issue. I'm going to show you how the mosses look like. So you can see how the mosses look like on your screen. Okay, so I think now you have the idea that what mosses look like. And since they are having a very thick layer, थोड़ी सी इस पे thick layer होती है, so that the soil is always protected. So soil जो होती है हमारी वो हमेशा protected रहती है from the soil erosion. The soil does not faces any kind of erosion. So minerals and nutrition that are present in the soil, they are not washed away. वो पानी के साथ बह नहीं जाते because we are having a covering over the soil. Mosses की एक dense covering होती है. That's why the nutrients of the soil, they remain in the soil. Okay. So this is it for today, and we are going to continue further in the next session. Peter, do you have any question? Anyone? Any student having any question? Yes? Any student is having any question? Okay, then. So that's it for today. Just do not leave the class. Let me just take your attendance. Just a second. Okay. So students, any query or any question or any term that you have not understood?
So what are antherozoids?
Antherozoids. Okay. Antherozoids are the structures which are produced by antheridium. Male sex organ को बोलते हैं antheridium, and antheridium are going to produce the antherozoids. Antheridium is the male sex organ, and antheridia, okay, antheridia is the plural form of it. Okay, now antherozoids are the male gametes which are going to be produced by the antheridium. So antheridium or antheridia जो male gametes को produce करते हैं, those are the antherozoids. Okay. Any other query, beta? So that's it for today. And if you do have any further question, just contact me on WhatsApp. Okay, I will solve your problem. So that's it for today. Thank you, everyone.